If your account has a balance, I'll give you my whole month's salary." Victor Evans laughed, tossing the words into the air like confetti. Several customers chuckled. A woman near the door smirked. One of the tellers snorted behind the glass. Victor wasn't done. "I mean, look at her," he added, nodding toward the young woman in the faded coat, clutching a worn leather folder. "Probably thinks this is a community center. We don't do food stamps here, sweetheart." Maya Williams froze in place. Victor didn't stop there. "Y'all seeing this? Someone call the Times, we got a fashion revolution in aisle 3. Maya Williams stood quietly in the center of the room, her body still, her face lifted, eyes level. She said nothing, but her cheeks burned. The heat wasn't just from embarrassment, it was a familiar heat, the kind that had once followed her down hallways in prep school, in country clubs, in boardrooms where she'd been the only one with skin like hers. She remembered a meeting years ago, where she was mistaken for a cleaner. Another time, a donor assumed she was the driver. And once, just once, at a charity gala honoring her own family foundation, someone asked her which table she was serving. She tightened her grip on the worn leather folder in her hands. She took a breath, long and slow, letting the heat cool. Then she raised her eyes, met Victor's stare, and said calmly, "I'm here to access a legacy account. I have the documentation. I'd appreciate it if someone could assist me." Victor scoffed. "Legacy account?" He turned theatrically to the others. "She thinks she has a legacy account. Lady, you're in the wrong zip code for legacies." Again the laughter. A louder ripple this time. The front desk staff tried to hide their smiles. One of the younger bankers chuckled and shook his head. Then Victor leaned forward over the counter, voice growing colder. "We're not running a shelter here. We serve real clients. If you're looking to cash a check from some temp job, take it to a grocery store. We don't entertain walk-ins with fairy tales." Still, Maya didn't move. Victor's control cracked. He stormed toward her, eyes wild. "I said get out." Before anyone could react, he shoved her hard by the shoulder. Maya stumbled backward, lost her footing, and fell against the polished tile floor. The worn folder in her hands spilled open, pages fluttering across the cold marble, ID documents, old deposit slips, a handwritten letter. Gasps rippled through the lobby. Maya sat still, breath caught in her throat, eyes not angry but wounded, quiet. A moment later, a young voice broke the silence. "Ma'am, let me help you." Daniel Parks, barely 26, rushed over from his desk. He knelt beside Maya, gently gathering her papers. "Are you all right?" She gave a small nod. Her palms were scraped, but she took the folder back with grace. Daniel stood, then extended a hand to help her up. Victor scoffed. "Daniel, what the hell do you think you're doing?" "I'm doing my job, sir," Daniel replied, his voice shaking slightly but holding firm. "She asked to verify an account, that's all." Victor waved an arm. "She doesn't have an account. She's faking it. You don't have to waste your time. She has documentation," Daniel said, interrupting, "and I have no reason to dismiss her without checking." Victor's mouth twitched in rage, but he didn't lunge again. Too many eyes were watching now, most of them not laughing anymore. Daniel guided Maya to a consultation desk off to the side. Her hands were trembling faintly as she sat down, but her eyes remained steady. "I just need to confirm something," she said. "This is tied to a founder's class designation. My name is Maya Williams." Daniel blinked at her, then began typing her name into the system. It only took a few keystrokes. An alert blinked red. Founder's class. Tier 1 verification. Do not proceed without oversight. Then came the numbers. 8 figures. Account active. Verified. The name. Maya Eleanor Williams. Lineage confirmed. Eleanor M. Williams. Founding partner. Daniel froze. His hands hovered above the keyboard like he wasn't sure what to do next. Victor, who had followed from a distance, shoved his way closer. "What now?" he grunted. Her little piggy bank showed $5. Daniel turned the screen toward him. Victor's face blanched. He stared in silence. The numbers didn't lie. The status didn't lie. You're a Williams?" he choked out. Maya lifted her head. Her voice was softer than before. "I'm Maya. That's enough for today. don't you think? The bank had gone quiet. The chuckles were long gone. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum more softly now. Victor stumbled back a step. His polished confidence was shattered. I didn't know. Maya didn't nod, didn't smile. I didn't ask you to, she said. I asked to be treated like a person. She rose slowly. Daniel stepped aside respectfully. Thank you, she said to him. You did your job. She walked toward the exit without another glance at Victor. No one laughed this time, and Victor Evans, once the loudest man in the room, stood rooted to the floor, held down not by force, but by the crushing weight of his own disgrace. The lobby doors closed behind Maya with a quiet hiss. But the weight of her presence lingered like smoke after a fire. Inside, silence hung thick. Victor Evans stood frozen near Daniel's desk, his mouth slightly open, but no words dared crawl out. His authority once unchallenged, bulletproof, was now fragile glass, under a growing spotlight. Outside, Maya stood still on the steps for a moment. The cold Manhattan breeze cut through her coat, but she didn't shiver. She gripped the folder tighter. Her hands still burned from the fall. Her face, though calm, was pulled tight by something deeper than pain, memory. You don't belong here. She'd heard those words before. Not always in so many syllables, but they were there, etched into stares, smirks, whispered judgment. The first time had been when she was 8, trying to enter the library through the front door with her grandmother. A security guard had blocked them gently, saying, "The service entrance is around the side." Her grandmother had said nothing, just smiled, and walked through anyway. "Walk proud," Grandma Eleanor had whispered then, "even when the world looks away." Now, nearly 2 decades later, Maya walked proud once again. She didn't go far, just across the street, into a small coffee shop with a flickering neon sign that said, "Howard's Beans and Bakes." The smell of cinnamon and fresh espresso pulled her into a seat near the window. Her breath fogged the glass as she sat, folder still in her lap, her mind racing back and forth between past and present. A waitress approached a woman in her late 50s, wearing a green apron and a tired smile. "You okay, honey?" she asked, eyeing the scrape on Maya's hand. "I will be," Maya replied, giving her a soft smile. "Can I get a tea? Chamomile if you have it." "Coming right up. You need ice for that hand?" "I've had worse," Maya said, though she accepted the napkin. Wrapped ice, the woman returned with. There was something comforting about the way older women checked on her. It reminded her of home, of family, of strength passed down like recipes and stories. Back across the street, inside the bank, the air had shifted. The customers whispered less, watched more. Some began to quietly gather their belongings. Others looked toward Daniel. Their curiosity piqued. Victor finally moved, stepping closer to Daniel's desk, voice barely contained. "You'll never work in this city again if you make this into something it's not." Daniel looked up, brows furrowed. "I didn't make anything." "You did." Victor's jaw tightened. "She set this up. You can't tell me that wasn't a stunt. Who walks into a bank dressed like that with an account like that?" Daniel closed the file on his screen. Someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Victor leaned in. "You don't know how this business works." "I know how people work." Daniel shot back, his voice gaining confidence. "And I know we're supposed to treat every customer with respect. Rich, poor, or disguised." "You think this is about manners?" Victor sneered. "This is about image. You want people walking into our branch looking like that and calling the shots? We serve a class here." Daniel stood up. His hands weren't shaking anymore. "She is the class. She's the legacy your branch runs on." Victor's lips curled, but he said nothing. He turned and stormed back toward his office, his polished shoes clicking like hammers against the tile. Back at the coffee shop, Maya sipped her tea slowly, her eyes fixed on the people coming and going. She could see the lobby from here, glass windows revealing a theater of unspoken hierarchies. A young man held the door open for an elderly woman. A father carried his daughter on his shoulders. And there was Daniel, still visible through the window, back at his desk, rubbing his face with both hands. She'd noticed something about him: hesitation, yes, but decency too. Not performative, not fear-based, just human. Her phone buzzed. A message lit the screen from a number saved under Uncle Reggie. "You did it?" Maya typed back, Step 1. They know my name now. There had been long discussions with her uncle about this, how to reintroduce herself into the institution her family had built. Her father had walked away from the bank decades ago, tired of the politics. Her grandmother had fought harder, but even she couldn't stop the slow erosion of values. Maya had promised herself, when the time came, she wouldn't return as an heiress. She would return as a test. And the bank had failed that test. But one person, just one, had passed. She took another sip, her hands steadying. A light drizzle began tapping against the window. Autumn rain, thin and cold. People on the street began pulling up collars, tilting umbrellas. Maya stood, tucked the folder back under her coat, and headed toward the door. Before leaving, she turned to the waitress. "Thank you." The woman smiled, then paused. "Say, you weren't just over at that bank, were you?" Maya nodded. They were pointing. "I figured they'd found something scandalous. Guess they just found someone better than them." Maya's smile deepened. Some people only see what they want. And she walked out into the rain. If you felt that too, like this video and comment your city. You never know who's watching near you. Back inside the bank, Victor sat alone in his office, staring blankly at the wall. For the first time in a long time, he felt unsteady. Not because he'd made a mistake, he'd made plenty of those, but because everyone had seen it. Daniel, meanwhile, reopened the system. He scrolled through Maya's profile again. Her account hadn't been touched in years, but the details were there. The founding documents, the old signatures, the trust designations. She wasn't just rich, she was legacy, rich. Her grandmother had been the first black woman to hold a banking charter in New York. Daniel sat back and whispered to himself, why would someone like that come in looking like? Then the answer came. Because how the bank treated her was the test. Because who stood up for her would be remembered. Rain traced long, crooked lines down the glass facade of Bristol and Easton Bank as the city pulsed on outside. Inside, the mood had shifted. The once humming lobby now carried a strange hush, like a concert hall moments after a sudden silence. Customers moved with less chatter. Tellers avoided eye contact, and staff tiptoed in the tension Victor Evans had left behind. In his office, Victor sat stiffly behind his glass desk, staring at nothing. His tie was slightly loosened, the shine on his ego dimmed by a single name, Williams. His mind reeled. Maya Eleanor Williams. He'd heard that name once. In a founder's luncheon years ago, spoken with reverence, even envy. But that Maya? That Williams? She wasn't supposed to walk through his lobby in old boots and a frayed coat. That version of wealth didn't exist in his carefully polished world. He had shoved her, in public, in front of staff and clients, and she had said nothing. That silence now roared louder than any lawsuit or press release could. It was the silence of power of a lion who didn't need to growl to make the jungle listen. Across the hall, Daniel Park stared at the screen on his monitor, rereading the account metadata. Every line, every code, every tag confirmed what he had seen with his own eyes. Maya Williams was not only an account holder, she was the registered beneficiary of the Eleanor Trust, a document still active and untampered since 1983. Her name had executive override access. Only 3 people in the entire Bristol and Easton system could say that. 2 were on the board. The third had just been shoved to the floor. Daniel's heart raced. How did no one know? He stood and walked toward the break room, needing air. Or at least a coffee strong enough to cut through the weight of the morning. As he passed by the teller line, he heard whispers. They said she's the founder's granddaughter. You think she's here to shut us down? Evans is toast. Did you see the security cam? Bet you he's deleting emails right now. Daniel closed the door behind him in the break room and exhaled slowly. He was just 6 months into this job. First career position, he'd studied financial ethics, believed in doing right, but had already started compromising small things, turning away customers who didn't look the part, ignoring coworkers who made quiet jokes about low-income applicants. But today, someone had drawn a line. Not with shouting, not with threats. Just by showing up. He poured himself a cup of burnt office coffee and sat at the edge of the counter. In his mind, he kept replaying that moment when he helped Maya to her feet. Her expression hadn't been shocked or even angry, just familiar with pain. Suddenly, the door cracked open. It was Melanie, one of the senior tellers. She walked in cautiously, her heels barely making a sound. "You okay?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "Yeah. You?" She leaned against the fridge, arms crossed. "I've worked here 12 years. Never seen Victor lose control like that. Ever." He shoved her, Daniel said flatly. "In front of everyone." And now everyone's pretending it didn't happen." Melanie shook her head. "You know what she told me once, years ago?" Daniel turned. "You've met her before?" Melanie smiled faintly. "She came in on a Saturday. Quiet. Dropped off a donation envelope for the bank's community fund. Wouldn't even leave a name. But I remembered her. Because she looked at me like I mattered." Daniel frowned. "Why hide who she is? Maybe to see if we deserve to know," Melanie replied. Back outside, Maya was walking once again. The drizzle had slowed to a mist. She stopped in front of a bronze plaque near the bank's corner wall, half covered in grime and ivy. She wiped the surface clean with her scarf. Bristol and Easton founders. Walter Bristol, Eleanor M. Williams, Harold Easton. Her fingers brushed over her grandmother's name. Eleanor had taught her everything: how to walk into a room with grace, how to write a contract with precision, how to lead with silence until speaking was necessary. But most of all, Eleanor taught her what power looked like when it was wrapped in humility. Inside the bank, Victor was on a call with legal. "No, I didn't know who she was," he snapped. "There was no flag, no alert. She looked like—" He stopped himself. "Like what?" the voice on the other end asked coolly. Victor didn't answer. He hung up and stood, pacing. He glanced at the lobby's security camera monitor, watching the replay of Maya's fall, Daniel helping her. The silence that followed. He grabbed his jacket. 5 minutes later, Maya stood still outside the bank, her eyes on the plaque. "Miss Williams?" a voice called out behind her. She turned. It was Daniel, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, standing nervously. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For what happened? You didn't deserve that." Maya looked at him a long moment, then said, "I know." Daniel blinked. I mean, thank you. For not making a scene. Most people would have. "I wasn't raised to prove myself in lobbies," she said, "especially not ones built by my family." Daniel flushed. "What will you do now?" Maya tilted her head. "What do you think I should do?" He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I think you already did it." Maya smiled back. In that moment, she remembered Eleanor again, not as a banker, not even as a pioneer, but as a grandmother who used to say, "When they forget who you are, walk in like you own the floor, because you do." The rain had stopped. The next morning, a muted buzz swept through the corridors of the Bristol and Easton headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. Word had already reached upper management. The name Maya Williams had ricocheted through emails, hallway whispers, and boardroom chatter. But at the local branch where it all happened, the energy was different, heavier. Victor Evans entered the building precisely at 8:15 a.m., as he always did. His gait was sharp, his shoes polished to a mirror shine, but something in his eyes had dimmed. He avoided eye contact. He passed Melanie without his usual nod. Daniel didn't even get a glance. He walked straight into his office, closed the glass door, and lowered the blinds. Across the room, Daniel sat at his desk, staring at a small slip of paper he'd found waiting for him that morning. It was folded neatly, and on the front, it simply read, "Legacy doesn't whisper. It watches." There was no signature, but he didn't need one. He turned to his monitor and reloaded Maya's file. The system had updated. Overnight notes from central operations were now attached to her account. One caught his eye. Founder lineage confirmed. Treat with Tier 1 discretion. Maintain dignity protocols at all levels. Dignity protocols. The irony almost made him laugh. Meanwhile, Maya stood in front of an apartment building in Harlem. Modest, clean, and wrapped in the warm scent of cinnamon and old wood. She carried the same leather folder, now tucked beneath her arm as she climbed the stairs to the second floor. She knocked gently. The door opened to reveal Uncle Reggie, Reverend Reginald Lewis, retired professor, Vietnam vet, and the last living brother of Eleanor M. Williams. His eyes lit up the moment he saw her. "Well, damn," he muttered, "and I thought you'd chicken out." Maya stepped into the apartment, closing the door behind her. "I didn't chicken out. No, But you did wait 10 years to walk into your own bank. She smiled tiredly, setting her coat on the chair. It had to be the right moment. Oh, Uncle Reggie chuckled, pouring her a cup of chicory coffee. And I take it the moment involved being shoved to the ground by some fool in a $500 tie? Maya sat, letting the warm cup rest in her hands. Yeah, that was the moment. He studied her face. Are you hurt? She shook her head. Not really. But you're different now, aren't you? Maya didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out the window. When I was on the ground, I wasn't thinking about pain. I was thinking about Grandma, and how she'd just stand up, fix her skirt, and keep walking like they never touched her. Reggie nodded. Because they never did. They touched the surface, baby girl, not the spirit. They never got close. Maya took a deep breath. The bank forgot who built it, who kept it alive during the 70 seconds when every other institution ran scared from black neighborhoods. They forgot that she didn't just serve people, she saw them. My teller. She saw herself in them, Reggie said quietly. Maya sipped the coffee. So now they'll see me. Across the city, the footage had already reached the boardroom security video from the branch lobby, showing Victor pushing Maya. The board president, a silver-haired man named Lawrence Whitmore, watched the clip in silence. When it ended, he looked at the others in the room. Gentlemen, he said evenly, we just shoved royalty. One director cleared his throat. Should we reach out? No, Whitmore said. We wait. She'll come to us. And when she does, we listen. At that very moment, Victor sat alone in his office, scrolling frantically through news feeds, social media, internal emails waiting for the first sign of fallout. His eyes were bloodshot, his pulse a steady throb behind his temple. Then an email. Subject line, Incident, immediate response requested. Sender, Lawrence Whitmore. Victor clicked. The email was short. Prepare a statement. Expect internal review. We will not be protecting you. He read it 3 times, then closed his laptop and sank into his chair. In the break room, Daniel refilled his coffee and caught Melanie standing by the window, scrolling through her phone. You see it yet? She asked. What? The video. Someone leaked it. His stomach tightened. Who? Doesn't matter. The world saw it. Daniel took out his phone. She was right. The video had already hit Twitter, slightly grainy but clear enough. The caption read, Heiress of historic black-owned bank shoved by its own manager. This is why we test systems. Over 200,000 views in 3 hours. A voice chimed from behind. You think she planned it? It was one of the senior loan officers. Daniel turned. You think that makes it better if she did? The man looked away. That evening, Maya returned home to her modest loft in Brooklyn. No marble floors, no high ceilings, just plants in the window, a record player humming Sam Cooke, and a quiet peace she had cultivated carefully. She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and logged into an internal board member access portal, something she hadn't touched in years. The welcome screen blinked. Welcome, Monsieur Williams. Legacy chair, inactive. Reactivate? She clicked, yes. Do. Then, she composed a single message and sent it to the board. It's time we remind the world what this institution was built for. I'll be attending the next board meeting. Kindly make room at the table. She sat back and closed the laptop. Outside, the city lights shimmered like stars lost in fog. The polished conference table at Bristol and Easton's headquarters stretched nearly 20 feet long, carved from black walnut and inlaid with brass. It had seen decades of power plays, deals, dismissals, and performative diversity initiatives. But this morning, for the first time in a long time, it felt like the table itself was holding its breath. 12 board members sat waiting, most of them men, most well past their 50s. Gray suits, cufflinks, and carefully neutral expressions were the uniform of the day. At the head sat Lawrence Whitmore, board president for 16 years. He'd served through 3 recessions, 1 acquisition scandal, and the silent ousting of 5 CEOs. But today, he was nervous. Is she late? Murmured Nathan Langley, a finance director with a reputation for being polite in public and petty in private. Lawrence checked the time. She said 10 sharp. As if summoned by cue, the double doors opened. Maya Williams stepped into the room wearing a tailored charcoal pantsuit. understated pearl earrings, and a calm, steady expression. She didn't carry a bag. She didn't need a folder. Her presence was enough. For a few seconds, no one moved. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She walked to the seat opposite Lawrence, the chair once held by her grandmother, Eleanor M. Williams, and pulled it out quietly. Then she sat, crossing one leg over the other, folding her hands gently. "Miss Williams," Lawrence said, standing. "Welcome back." "I never left," she replied. A beat of silence. Nathan cleared his throat. "We're very sorry about what happened at the branch. I assure you disciplinary measures are being considered." Maya turned her eyes toward him. "I didn't ask about discipline." Nathan blinked. "Well, still, as a show of respect, I'm not here for theater," she said. Lawrence raised a hand. "Let's let her speak." She turned her gaze across the room, sweeping each face. "This bank was founded on the back of integrity. That's not just a word in a mission statement. It's the reason my grandmother opened the first Bristol and Easton account in a Harlem church basement during the 1,960 seconds. Some board members shifted. Others looked down. She didn't build this institution for the privileged. She built it so people who looked like her could walk into a room and be seen, not sized up." Lawrence nodded slowly. "And we've lost that, haven't we?" Maya let the silence answer. She leaned forward, voice low and steady. "You allowed your branches to become museums of exclusion. Polished, well, staffed, but hollow. The soul left this bank years ago, and you didn't notice." "We noticed the numbers," said a man across the table, Carter Doyle, head of strategic expansion, "and they're strong." Maya's tone remained even. "So are the numbers for cancer in untreated patients. Doesn't mean the system's healthy." A long pause. She continued. "I was dragged to the floor in my own house, and no one in that room knew they were looking at ownership. That is not just Victor Evans' failure. That is yours." Carter looked away. Nathan shifted in his seat. "So, what is it you want, exactly?" Maya met his gaze without blinking. "Control." He scoffed, then immediately tried to cover it with a cough. "I don't mean CEO," Maya clarified. "I don't need a title. But from this day forward, I will approve every community fund initiative, every internal DEI policy, every hiring plan above regional manager. I want a new department launched under legacy oversight with its own budget, its own team, and it reports only to the board." "That's highly irregular," Nathan said quickly. "So was slavery," Maya replied. "We're still correcting for that, too." Lawrence interjected gently. "She's not asking. She's reminding us. The Williams Trust still owns 15% of our private equity shares. Her family name built this place. We'd be fools to push her out again." Maya turned to him. "I don't want to push anyone, but I will stand where I belong. I've come to reclaim a legacy that was stolen not by malice but by comfort. And comfort, gentlemen, is the enemy of progress." There was no vote. There didn't need to be. One by one, heads nodded. She stood. "You'll receive the plan by week's end." As she walked out, the door clicked shut behind her like punctuation. That afternoon, Victor Evans received the official letter. It was typed cleanly on board stationery and signed by Lawrence himself. "Effective immediately. Your position at Bristol and Easton has been terminated. Further instructions will follow pending internal legal review." He stared at it, lips parted, breath thin. On his desk, the employee roster still glowed from his screen. Under branch associates, a new tag appeared next to Daniel's name. Promoted, interim client relations lead. Victor crumpled the letter and sat back, the world suddenly smaller. Meanwhile, Daniel exited the subway near Prospect Park, walking the extra blocks to Maya's loft. She opened the door herself. "I didn't expect you," she said, surprised but not unkind. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "and ask if I could help." "With what?" "Whatever you're building next." Maya studied him a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." As he entered, the scent of old books, warm tea, and lavender filled the air. On a nearby table sat a weathered photograph of Eleanor, smiling beside a younger Maya. Above it, in a gilded frame, were her grandmother's words, handwritten in ink. "The banks they build aren't made of brick. They're made of silence. Break it." Maya looked at Daniel. "You sure you're ready for this?" He nodded. "I am now." The next week passed with quiet urgency. Across the city, emails were forwarded, memos rewritten, meetings rescheduled. But no one said her name too loudly. Not out of fear, out of awe. Maya Williams had become something more than a person. She had become a story one everyone at Bristol and Easton was now trying to rewrite themselves into. Inside the branch where it all began, change was subtle but unmistakable. The receptionist no longer filtered customers by their clothing. The security guard, once more preoccupied with posture than protection, now stood with eyes open, softer. The lobby no longer hummed with cold detachment, it listened now. And Daniel? Daniel was learning what leadership felt like when it wasn't forced. He arrived early each morning, shook hands with the janitor, greeted every teller by name, and returned phone calls from customers that Victor had long ignored. His desk was cleaner, his shoulders more square, but inside, a question kept ticking in the back of his mind. What happens when legacy becomes responsibility? He would find out soon enough. Maya, meanwhile, had begun visiting each of the original founding branch locations quietly, without press or entourage. She would walk the halls, speak with the longest-serving staff, read the names on the walls, the dedications no one looked at anymore. Today, she was in Newark, standing inside a dim corner of a branch that hadn't been renovated since the early 90s. The walls were faded beige, the tile cracked in places, but it had something the flagship branch had long lost: memory. The branch manager, a sharp, retired Marine named Jacqueline Porter, stood beside her. She was a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked braids pulled back tight and a voice like firm velvet. This was the first branch to offer business loans to black-owned stores on this street, Jacqueline said. Your grandmother signed off on everyone. Maya nodded. I know. I found the ledgers in the archive box. Eleanor Williams. Signature on every third line. Jacqueline looked at her. You walk like her. Maya smiled. That's the highest compliment I've had all week. She would have liked you showing up like this. Maya stepped closer to a wall of photos, one of which showed a younger Eleanor breaking ground with a small group of locals in 1972. She always told me, a legacy isn't what you build, it's who knows they belong in it. Jacqueline's voice grew quiet. You're bringing that back? I'm trying, Maya replied, but I can't do it alone. Will you help me? Jacqueline didn't hesitate. I never stopped. Back in Manhattan, Daniel sat in a newly reassigned office, modest, not flashy, but filled with light. The corner windows gave him a view of the park. A handwritten note rested on his desk, slipped under his door earlier that morning. Legacy never asks if you're ready. It waits until you act like it. M.W. He read it twice. A soft knock came at his door. It was Melanie, holding a worn manila envelope. This just came from archive. He opened it. Inside were copies of old internal memos from the 1,982nd, reports signed by Eleanor Williams, with attached photographs of community meetings, loan approvals, youth scholarships. Daniel stared at the final image. Eleanor sitting with a group of children, pointing to a chalkboard that read in cursive, We don't loan hope, we invest it. He looked up at Melanie. We're going to rebuild the Community Trust Division, the right way. Melanie smiled. That's what I wanted to hear. That evening, Maya returned to Eleanor's house, still standing in the South Bronx, preserved but untouched. The wooden porch creaked under her feet. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and paper. She wandered into the study. Dust floated in the afternoon light, cutting through aged curtains. Books lined the shelves, titles on finance, civil rights, and gospel devotionals. On the desk lay an old ledger, untouched for decades. She opened it slowly. The first page held a list. Names, dates, amounts, microloans, most with handwritten notes beside them. For Latoya's Bakery, Mr. Whitman's Barbershop, Single Mother, Rent Bridge. Then, on the next page, a line that made Maya pause. When they forget your face, make them remember your fingerprint. It wasn't just a metaphor. Beneath it, a single fingerprint, Eleanor's, stamped in ink beside her initials. Maya touched the page gently. A chill passed through her, but it wasn't fear, it was purpose. A quiet resolve that settled in her spine like steel. She turned to the last page, which was blank, save for a single name scrawled in the top corner. Maya. No note, no instructions, just the name. Her name, as if Eleanor knew, even then, that the bank and the burden would one day return to her granddaughter. The next day, the press caught wind of the boardroom shift. Headlines danced across morning newsletters. Legacy returns. Maya Williams steps in at Bristol and Easton. A granddaughter's quiet takeover. When banks remember who built them. Reporters circled the block. Photographers stood outside the headquarters. But Maya didn't appear on the steps. She didn't call a press conference. Instead, she met with a small team on the 5th floor and began reviewing outdated grant programs, neglected real estate opportunities, and ignored community partnerships. "What's first?" Daniel asked her in that meeting. Maya looked up, a quiet fire in her eyes. "We remind them," she said, "one branch at a time." Beneath the morning fog, the Bronx hummed with a kind of rhythm only locals knew how to hear: buses sighing at curbs, old men arguing at corner bodegas, church bells echoing from a block too far to place. And somewhere between all that, the house of Eleanor Williams stood quiet but alert, like it was listening. Inside, Maya sat at the kitchen table, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by blueprints, handwritten notes, and scanned copies of bank archives. Her tea had gone cold. She hadn't moved in over an hour. Her eyes were fixed on a faded map of New York City from 1975. Tiny red pins marked each community investment Eleanor had approved. Most were in places still forgotten today. It's not enough to fix what's broken, Maya thought. You have to rebuild what was erased. The front door creaked open. Uncle Reggie. "You sleep?" he asked, raising a brow. Maya didn't look up. Eventually. He walked in with a box of bagels, the kind you could only get from an old vendor near the 149th Street station. "You know, most folks your age do brunch. You're out here trying to reform capitalism. Brunch won't change lending policies," she said flatly, still not looking away from the map. Reggie set the bagels down, peering over her shoulder. "What are you tracking?" "The investment blackout zones. Look at these neighborhoods." Eleanor signed off on nearly every small business loan request, from 1,970 to 1,985. But then something shifted. By the early 90 seconds, the approvals stopped. The bank pulled out. Reggie exhaled. "That was after your father stepped away. That whole generation walked away." No one fought back when the suits from Midtown started redirecting funds. Maya sat back, rubbing her temples. "So now we fight forward." "There." Reggie pointed at a circle Maya had drawn around a block in East Flatbush. "You know what used to be there?" She nodded. 3 barber shops, a record store, a dance studio. Eleanor funded all of them. And now? A pharmacy chain and a liquor store. Reggie pulled out a pin from his pocket and stuck it into the map. "Then that's where you start." Back at the Midtown branch, Daniel's desk had been moved to an office with frosted windows. He didn't care much for the upgrade, but the title, Community Reinvestment Liaison, was something he wore like armor. Every day, he dug through dusty financial records, reactivated forgotten community files, and flagged loan rejections that didn't make sense. Melanie popped in with a folder. More legacy data from the 80 seconds. "I also found a tape, old VHS. It's labeled Williams Testimony. Thought it might be a deposition." Daniel took it carefully. "Where did this come from?" "Storage closet in the basement. I had to bribe maintenance with a sandwich to unlock it." He laughed. "Worth every bite." He placed the tape on the desk and opened the folder. Inside were notes from Eleanor's final public address before she retired from day-to-day operations. Her words were scribbled in longhand on Bristol and Easton letterhead, barely legible, but powerful. "A bank isn't a vault. It's a voice, and ours must never go silent, even when it shakes." "Die." Daniel looked up. "Maya needs to see this." That afternoon, Maya arrived at the flagship branch, greeted by curious eyes and awkward smiles. No red carpet, no parade. Just the weight of expectation and the tension of correction. She stepped into a conference room where Daniel and Melanie waited, along with Gina Reyes, a young financial analyst Maya had specifically requested from the Queens branch. Gina stood as Maya entered. "Miss Williams, I'm honored." Maya shook her hand. Call me Maya. Titles build walls. They sat, and Daniel slid the folder and tape across the table. Your grandmother's original community testimony, he said, and a possible video recording. Maya opened the folder and read the first few lines. Her throat tightened, but her voice remained steady. She was already warning them about where the bank was heading. Gina leaned forward. So, what do we do now? Maya looked up, her eyes sharper than before. We rewrite the charter, re-establish the Williams Trust Initiative. We create a modern lending blueprint, but this time, it's built for neighborhoods, not profits. Melanie nodded. We'll need field agents, people who know these streets. I want 10 branches activated for pilot programs, Maya said. 1 in each borough. And 2 more. Atlanta and Detroit. My grandmother never got to expand south. I will. Daniel raised a brow. You sure we can move this fast? She met his gaze. The pain didn't wait. Why should we? That night, Maya returned to the Harlem apartment Eleanor once used for private consultations. It had been closed for years, dust thick on the floor, furniture covered in sheets. She uncovered an old file cabinet and began flipping through its contents, receipts, photos, letters from families thanking Eleanor for saving their home, believing in their dream, treating them like people. No. She found a photo of Eleanor in front of the original East Flatbush branch, surrounded by community leaders and a row of small business owners. Handwritten on the back, let them see who owns the sidewalk. Outside, rain tapped lightly on the windows. Maya sat in the armchair where her grandmother once held office hours, the VHS tape Daniel had given her now playing on a small TV they'd found in storage. The image was grainy Eleanor in her late 60s, calm but firm, speaking directly into the camera. You can't build a future on numbers, you build it on trust, and when they break that trust, you don't walk away. You rebuild it, brick by brick, breath by breath, until every soul who walks through your door knows they matter. Maya didn't cry, she didn't flinch. She whispered to herself, I'm rebuilding, Grandma. And the city listened. The boardroom was quieter than usual, no coffee clinking, no small talk, just the sound of suits shifting in high-backed chairs and fingers drumming against mahogany. Lawrence Whitmore stood at the head, a folder in front of him, unopened. Seated around him were the remaining board members, noticeably more somber since Maya's return. They weren't afraid. Not exactly. But they had seen the headlines. They'd read the leaked testimony, and they knew what was coming. Before we begin, Lawrence said, finally breaking the silence, let's call this what it is, an audit. A few members exchanged glances. Not of numbers, he continued, of intent, of direction, and of legacy. He opened the folder. Inside was a single photograph, a young Eleanor Williams standing beside a boy holding a loan approval certificate, tears in his eyes, arms around his mother. She approved this loan in 1981. The boy now owns 5 grocery stores across the Bronx. Still banks with us. Still signs every document with a note, because Eleanor said yes. Nathan Langley cleared his throat. What's your point? Lawrence looked up, dead center. My point is, we forgot why this bank was founded. He turned to the group. And Maya hasn't. Across town, Maya stood before the East Flatbush property, a rusted, closed storefront that once held Eleanor's first pilot branch. The building was tagged with graffiti, the awning sun-bleached and barely legible, but she saw it. She saw the past buried beneath the dust. Daniel and Gina stood beside her, both holding tablets with blueprints and renovation estimates. It'll take 6 months to get this place operational, Gina said. A year if we do it right. Maya didn't look away from the building. Do it right, no shortcuts. I want this to be the model open design, community board, financial literacy workshops, in-house childcare while clients meet with advisors. Daniel nodded, scribbling notes. Also, Maya added, no marble, no glass towers. I want this place to feel like it belongs here. She took a step forward, placing her palm on the dusty glass. They called this the Williams pilot, she murmured. It failed once. We won't let it again. Back at headquarters, Melanie stepped into Daniel's office with urgency. You need to see this. She dropped a file onto his desk thicker than the others. Old rejection logs, memos from Evan's team, dozens of loan applications from minority business owners marked with vague flags. Inconsistent revenue. Insufficient model. Unqualified market. All rubber. Stamped within 48 hours. Daniel's jaw tightened. Was this system-wide? Mostly Manhattan and Brooklyn, Melanie said. But here's the kicker: half of them reapplied 2 years later, and were approved, after the applicants added white business partners. Daniel stared at the folder. So we weren't just failing communities. We were training them to lie. Melanie nodded, and penalizing them if they didn't. That evening, Maya sat in a dim jazz bar in Bed-Stuy, her one quiet refuge in the city. The room smelled of bourbon and old leather. On the stage, a man played a trumpet like he was telling secrets to the dark. Reggie arrived a few minutes later, shaking off the rain. He took the stool beside her, waved for a whiskey, and waited. "I found the rejection logs," she said without looking at him. He whistled low. "You already knew, though, didn't you?" "I did," she said. "But knowing isn't the same as proving." He sipped his drink. "So what now?" Maya exhaled slowly. "We issue public apologies to every applicant turned away under that criteria. And we start a new loan forgiveness fund, $20 million. Reggie raised a brow. "That'll rattle the investors." "They'll survive," she said. He looked at her long, then asked the one question he'd been holding in. "Why now, Maya? Why after all these years? You could have walked in when your name was added to the board. You could have taken over a decade ago." She looked at him, eyes steady. "Because before now, I would have done it for revenge. And now? Now I'm doing it for repair." The music swelled behind them, horns bending sorrow into beauty. 2 days later, Maya walked back into the headquarters. The air was different now, quieter, but not heavy. It was like the whole place was waiting for breath to return. She stepped into the auditorium where over 100 employees sat waiting. A screen behind her displayed just 2 words. "Course correction." She took the podium without notes. "I won't keep you long," she began, "but I will be honest." Silence. "This bank has failed. Not financially, not legally, but morally. It has failed to be what it promised, to be what it was built for." "Oh." She paused, letting that sink in. "But failure is only final when you stop trying. And we are not finished." Some employees sat straighter. "I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to ask for hands. Because this work, this repair can't be done by a single name on a foundation plaque. It has to be done by all of us. Loan by loan. Person by person. Street by street." She looked out at them, tellers, analysts, janitors, managers. "If you're here for titles, for bonuses, for image, this is your exit ramp. But if you're here to be part of the repair, then welcome home." The room held stillness. Not the kind born of fear, but reverence. A single person clapped. Then 2. Then the whole room. Maya stepped back, hands folded. For the first time in years, the bank was listening again. The next morning began without ceremony. No cameras, no applause, just a handwritten list. It sat on Maya's desk, penned neatly in blue ink, names, dozens of them. Each one followed by a red X, the mark used in Eleanor's old audit files to indicate unjustified rejections. These were the people who had walked into the bank in hope and walked out invisible. Maya ran her fingers down the list. Each name was a story. A silence. A denial that had reshaped someone's life. She picked up the phone. "Get me the records office." And a full printout of archived denials from 1,980 to 2005 by zip code, ethnicity, and reason for rejection. "I want them digitized within the week." The clerk on the other end stammered. That's thousands of files, Miss Williams." "I know. That's why we start now." Across the office, Daniel paced his new glass-walled space. It still felt too large, too clean. He missed the cramped desk and chipped mug. But purpose had no patience for nostalgia. Melanie stepped in, tablet in hand. "The Flatbush project's been approved. Construction starts next Tuesday." Daniel nodded. "And the community hiring plan?" "All local. We posted positions this morning: banking assistants, translators, daycare staff. Over 200 applications in an hour." He smiled, but his eyes stayed serious. "Tell them this isn't just a job. It's reparation." Melanie raised an eyebrow. "You sure that's the word you want to use?" "I am," he said, "because it's the one no one else is brave enough to say." "Oh." She handed him the tablet. Then you're gonna love this. On screen was a leaked memo from a national banking oversight group, dry, bureaucratic, but very clear. Bristol and Easton model under review. Potential federal adoption of legacy oversight model pending pilot results. Daniel stared. They're watching us. Good, Melanie said. Let them learn something. At a quiet corner cafe in the Bronx, Maya met with the first 3 names from her list. Mrs. Charlene Briggs, now 67, was a retired seamstress who had once applied for a small loan to open a tailoring shop. Rejected for market instability. Mr. Rodney Ellis, 54, had tried to start a food truck in the early 2000s, denied for unclear scalability. Tamika Hart, 49, had submitted a business plan for a home tutoring program. She was told not viable in current demographics. They all sat across from Maya, unsure whether to believe the invitation had been real. I wanted to thank you for meeting me, Maya began, pouring them each a cup of strong coffee. And to say something you should have heard 20 years ago. We were wrong. Mrs. Briggs folded her hands. Why now? Because now I have the authority. And the will. Rodney frowned. What's that supposed to change? Maya reached into her folder and laid out 3 new loan proposals. Updated terms. 0 interest grace period. Business mentorship. Community investment backing. Tamika stared at the paper. This is real? Yes, Maya said softly. This is yours, if you still want it. There was a long silence. Then Mrs. Briggs leaned forward, tears pooling. You're the granddaughter, aren't you, of Miss Eleanor? Maya nodded. Charlene laughed through the tears. Lord, she used to walk me home from choir when I was 12. Told me I had strong hands. You still do, Maya said. And we need them. Oh, back at the Midtown branch, the new Legacy Oversight Department had taken over a corner of the 4th floor. The walls were stripped of corporate gloss, replaced with portraits of local entrepreneurs, old letters from clients, a mural of Eleanor Williams sketched in charcoal. Daniel walked the floor with Gina, who was now acting head of data equity. This whole room's a think tank, she explained. We're collecting stories, mapping patterns of neglect, and rebuilding trust in real time. Daniel nodded. And how's the staff adjusting? Gina smirked. They're nervous. This place used to reward silence. Now we're handing out promotions for telling the truth. Later that evening, Maya returned to Eleanor's house. She unlocked a drawer in the old study desk and pulled out a leather-bound book. It was Eleanor's private ledger, not for money, but for people. Each page held names and brief notes. Gregory, struggling with alcohol, needs mentorship. Juanita, pregnant, wants to open bakery, feels ashamed. Ronald, angry, but brilliant, don't give up on him. Maya turned to the last page, blank, waiting. She picked up a pen and wrote, Tamika, Briggs, Ellis, their stories aren't over. She closed the book and stood by the window, watching the last light fade from the sky. This wasn't charity. This was correction. And she wasn't building a legacy anymore. She was restoring one. The morning Maya announced the launch of the Eleanor Williams Restoration Fund, the press had barely finished digesting her last move. Headlines were still buzzing with her community loan reboots and the hiring surge across borough branches. But this was different. This wasn't just financial. It was moral. A public acknowledgement of harm done. A direct offer of repair, $20 million earmarked for individuals and businesses who had been denied access to capital due to systemic bias and flawed internal metrics from the bank's own archives. When she stepped into the press room, there were no corporate banners behind her, just a black and white photo of Eleanor smiling with a child in her lap, and the words, "We don't owe you charity, we owe you justice." The room quieted as Maya took the podium. Today, she began, we're not making history. We're correcting it. Cameras clicked, pens paused. For decades, this bank built walls between wealth and worth, access and identity. We built branches in places we didn't serve. And we smiled, while denying help to the very people who once trusted us. She looked across the sea of reporters. We have unearthed over 3,000 cases of unjustified loan denials. And that's just what's documented. We may never find them all. But the ones we do, we will honor. A hand shot up in the back. Are you concerned about legal backlash? Admission of wrongdoing? Maya's response was immediate. I'm not here to protect our reputation. I'm here to restore our responsibility. The room fell into a stunned silence. Effective today. The Eleanor Williams Restoration Fund is live. We've created an independent board of community leaders, none of whom are bank executives, to review and award reparative grants. No strings, no PR tours, just restoration. And, inside the Legacy Oversight Office, Daniel and Gina worked through the application portal infrastructure. It had to be simple, transparent, and human. No algorithms, Gina muttered as she scrolled through drafts. We do this by hand. Each one deserves eyes, real ones. Daniel nodded. People need to know someone read their story, not just crunch their numbers. Melanie entered with a short stack of folders. First 20 letters, all handwritten, some from elders who still don't use the internet. Daniel opened the first one. My name is Raymond Carter. In 1992, I applied for a $5,000 loan to open a music store on Lenox. I had good credit, a full business plan. The manager told me I looked like trouble. I never banked again. Daniel's voice cracked. He included a copy of the original rejection slip. Gina took a sharp breath. How many more of these do we think we'll get? Thousands, Melanie said. And they're going to break us before they make us. Daniel looked up. Then let's get started. Meanwhile, Victor Evans sat alone in a cheap apartment in Long Island City. His suits were in dry cleaner bags, untouched. His phone hadn't rung in days, and the internet had made him infamous in exactly the way no man wants to be. Disgraced banker shoved heir to founding legacy. His attorney had stopped answering. The job offers weren't coming. He watched Maya's press conference on a cracked TV screen. When she said the word reparations, his face twisted with contempt. But somewhere beneath the bruised ego and the burning shame, he felt something else. Jealousy, because she stood for something now, and he didn't. That evening, Maya walked through the now gutted East Flatbush property. Construction was underway, but the bones of the old branch still showed wood panels from the original teller booths, murals faded under layers of plaster. She stood in the center of the lobby and closed her eyes. You told me legacy wasn't inherited, she whispered, speaking aloud to the quiet. You said it had to be earned, and now I know why. Behind her, Reggie appeared with two hard hats in hand. You sure you don't want to name it after yourself? He asked. Maya chuckled. Not a chance. You earned it, though. So did the people I'm building it for. She took the hat and slid it on. Come on. We've got more walls to tear down. In the following week, over 12,000 applications poured in. Some were full of rage, others were soft with hope. But each one carried the same echo. I remember a barber from Crown Heights who had been denied 3 times, a nurse from Bed-Stuy who had given up on her clinic dream, a family from Queens who had watched their corner store get undercut by a chain financed by the same bank that denied them. Maya read as many as she could, every night, under a warm lamp with her grandmother's photo nearby. And when she found herself overwhelmed, she whispered, one by one, because that was how Eleanor did it. Not with grand gestures, but with open doors. Maya sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor of Eleanor's study, a single envelope in her lap. It had been tucked deep behind a false panel in the back of the desk, drawer sealed, yellowing with age, and addressed in elegant, looping script. To be opened when she's ready. New name, new date. Just that. Reggie sat nearby, thumbing through a box of old cassette recordings labeled Staff Meetings. 1983. He glanced over. That looks heavy. Maya nodded. Feels heavier than anything I've carried so far. She slid her finger under the flap, carefully, reverently. Inside was a single page, handwritten, the ink faded, but the voice unmistakable. Asterisk Maya. If you're reading this, it means you've chosen to stay. I never wanted you to carry this weight, not because I didn't believe you could, but because I knew what it would cost you. This bank was built on promises, but some of them were broken before they were ever spoken aloud. I tried to fix what I could, but the silence was louder than I expected. And the suits? They learned to smile while stepping over truth. Asterisk? Maya paused, swallowing. Reggie watched her, quiet. Asterisk. There are ghosts in these ledgers. Not the haunting kind, the remembering kind. The ones that sit at the back of every denial form, every missed signature, every closed door. You're going to hear them. You're going to feel them. And some days, you'll wonder if you're making a dent at all. But remember this, justice doesn't move fast. It moves forward. Maya folded the letter slowly, her eyes wet but not broken. She knew, she whispered. She knew it would fall on me. Reggie leaned back against the wall. Eleanor always played the long game. You were the end game. Downtown, at the new Restoration Fund satellite office, Gina led a small task force through stacks of submissions. An elderly gentleman sat quietly across from her desk, hat in his lap. "My name's Lester Thompson," he said, voice soft with age. "I came here in 1979 from Alabama. Brought everything I had to New York. I wanted to open a soul food kitchen with my wife." He paused. "They said my idea was outdated. No demand for Southern food in Harlem, they told me. Can you believe that?" Gina smiled gently. "I can. We lost everything, had to move back south, but I kept the letter, the denial." He reached into his coat and pulled out a brittle document, edges torn. Gina looked it over. It was real, time-stained and cruel in its brevity. "I don't want to check," he said. "I just wanted someone to see it." She looked him in the eye. "I see it, and I see you." He stood, nodded, and tipped his hat. "Tell that Williams girl she's doing her grandma proud." "I will," Gina promised. Back at headquarters, Daniel stepped into the boardroom, arms filled with binders. He placed them on the table one by one, each labeled by borough. Lawrence Whitmore looked up from his seat, brows raised. "What's all this?" "Community impact metrics," Daniel said. "Real ones. Based on the new fund, the restored lending programs, and the financial literacy centers. This is what actual equity looks like." A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Nathan Langley sneered. "Are we running a bank or a nonprofit now?" Maya stepped through the door just in time to answer. "We're running a legacy," she said, "one that outlasts your annual reports." She placed a smaller binder on the table. "And this is your chance to be part of it," Nathan chuckled. "And if we don't sign off," Maya smiled, calm but unflinching, "then your names won't be on the next one." The silence was thick enough to swallow. Lawrence leaned forward. "I'll sign." One by one, the others followed. All but Nathan. He rose, lips thin. "I built my reputation on numbers, not nostalgia." Maya nodded. "Then I hope your numbers sleep well at night." He walked out without another word. Daniel exhaled. "Well, that was dramatic." Maya turned to the rest of the board. "Let's get back to work." Later that night, Maya returned to Eleanor's porch. She sat in the same rocking chair her grandmother used to sit in, watching the neighborhood settle into twilight kids on bikes, dogs barking at shadows, music drifting from an open window. She held Eleanor's letter in her lap. "I stayed," she whispered. The porch creaked beneath her. The wind rustled the trees. And for the first time in a long while, Maya felt not just the weight of responsibility but the presence of rightness. A legacy was never built in silence. It echoed in every name remembered, and she would remember them all. The first signs of trouble didn't come with noise. They came with omissions. Melanie was the first to notice. While double-checking Restoration Fund disbursements, she discovered 5 applications marked approved on paper, but no funds had been released. At first, she thought it was a technical delay. Then she checked the timestamps. All 5 approvals had been altered, digitally overwritten in the system logs, with metadata pointing to an off-site IP address that didn't match any department. Melania frowned. She called Daniel. "I need you to come down to records and bring your security login." 15 minutes later, Daniel stood beside her, reviewing the terminal logs. "These aren't glitches," he said. "Someone's manipulating access credentials." Melanie scrolled down. "And they're targeting Black and Latinx applicants only." The original approvals were flagged as system risk, but those flags were added manually. Post-approval. Daniel clenched his jaw. "This isn't just sabotage, it's erasure." He tapped his badge. "We bring this to Maya. Now." When they reached her office, Maya was already reading a printed dossier one Reggie had dropped off an hour earlier. It was a deep dive report on anonymous donor activity tied to the bank's PAC fund over the past decade. "This isn't just about loans," she said without looking up. It's about political leverage. Melanie handed her the printouts. It's happening inside the system, Maya. Right now. Someone's trying to dismantle the fund from the back end. Maya's face didn't flinch. She flipped through the pages. Fast. Create a secure parallel database, she said. No external access. Assign oversight to Gina and an independent reviewer. I want an audit trail that can't be touched. Daniel hesitated. What if they find out we're monitoring? Maya looked up, eyes sharp. Good. Let them know we're watching now. The next day, a name resurfaced. Nathan Langley. Though he had stepped down from the boardroom in protest weeks earlier, he hadn't gone far. A leaked email surfaced from an internal whistleblower. It showed Nathan forwarding confidential fund data to a private equity group based in Miami. That group? A holding firm that had tried to purchase several of the East Flatbush and Harlem properties, the same ones Maya had marked for community development. When the story broke, the news hit hard. Former Bristol and Easton board member linked to shadow buyouts of reinvestment zones. Public outcry exploded. Daniel stormed into Maya's office. He's trying to gentrify the exact neighborhoods we're rebuilding. Maya stood, quiet. Reggie entered moments later, tossing a flash drive onto the desk. I pulled records from the city zoning office. Langley's firm submitted development blueprints 3 weeks ago. High-rise condos, yoga studios, valet parking. Melanie blinked. He was planning this before he walked out. No, Maya corrected, voice steady. He walked out because we got in his way. She turned to Daniel. What's our legal leverage? He didn't hesitate. Fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and if we can tie the data leak to manipulation, possible federal violations. Reggie whistled. We going to court? Maya sat down, laced her fingers. No. Everyone froze. No? Melania echot. Maya leaned forward. We go to the people first. That Friday, the bank held an open forum in Harlem, the first in a planned series called Reckonings and Repairs. No. Hundreds packed the community center gym. Some came with folded letters, some with tear-streaked faces, others with hard questions. Maya stood alone at the podium. This bank once closed its doors to your futures, she began. And now, someone inside is trying to steal those futures again. She paused. The room held its breath. But not this time. This time, we see it, we name it, and we fight it. Together. From the back, a voice shouted, You taking him to jail? The crowd murmured. Maya nodded slowly. I'm taking him to the court of truth, and I'm asking every one of you to sit in the jury. She outlined the leaked plan, Nathan's secret developments, the manipulated rejections, the backroom deals. Then she pointed to the projector, where emails and zoning documents lit up the wall. You were never the risk, she said. You were the target, and that ends now. The applause began like thunder rolling in. The next day, Maya's legal team filed a formal complaint with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. Gina released a transparency report showing every manipulated approval. Melanie hosted a live-stream walkthrough of the secure restoration database. And Daniel? He stood on the courthouse steps, looked into a row of cameras, and said the words that echoed across every major news network. We're not just a bank anymore. We're a movement. That night, Maya returned to Eleanor's porch. She sat in silence, staring at the stars, the letter from weeks ago folded in her pocket. You were right, she whispered. Justice doesn't move fast. But tonight, it moved, and for the first time, the air felt lighter. Not finished, but freer. The media frenzy didn't die down. It only shifted focus. Now, it wasn't just about Maya Williams, the hidden heiress. It was about what she represented, a quiet revolution led not from the streets, but from the ledgers. Across America, smaller banks began reviewing their own historical rejection rates. Community coalitions sprang up in cities like Chicago, Atlanta, and Oakland, using Maya's transparency model as a blueprint. But while the outside world buzzed with praise and protests, inside Maya's office, a different kind of reckoning unfolded. A letter had arrived. Unmarked envelope. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note. You're not the only one who remembers. A name erased. Attached was a copy of a loan rejection from 1986. But unlike others, this one had a note scribbled in red. Send to back file. Use alternate code. No approval unless overruled by board. Maya stared at the note. Her hands trembled slightly. This wasn't just racial profiling. This was policy. By the end of the week, Gina and Melanie had compiled over 47 similar cases. Most were buried deep in paper archives labeled special holds. The language used was vague but consistent coded terms that shielded systemic targeting behind the veil of due diligence. Daniel looked over the files and let out a low whistle. They built a second rejection system. A shadow system, Maya nodded. And I want it exposed. Every page, every name. Gina tapped the tablet. We've started logging everything into the Red Ledger archive. Password protected, but visible to any applicant who requests a historical review. Melanie added, we're also flagging all internal memos that use terms like undesirable demographic, cultural mismatch, or unstable client base. Reggie, standing quietly at the window, finally spoke. You realize this isn't just bank stuff anymore, right? Maya turned. It never was. Meanwhile, the legal case against Nathan Langley took a dramatic turn. An anonymous witness, once part of the old executive board, submitted sworn testimony stating that Langley had proposed the shadow rejection system during a closed-door session in 1985. It was meant, he said, to protect the bank from reputational risk in lending to untested communities. His words, not history, just confession. At the next board meeting, Maya played a newly restored audio clip, one of Eleanor's private staff briefings from 1990. Her voice filled the room, clear, fierce, and urgent. If you silence someone's financial future, you are committing a quieter crime. But it is no less violent. No one spoke. Then Maya stood. Our next step is public apology. Formal. National. Not just a press release. A full-page letter in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Essence magazine. Nathan's seat remained empty, permanently vacated. On the following Sunday, Maya took a detour to a small church in Crown Heights. No press, no fanfare. She had received a letter from Reverend Elsie Boone, a retired pastor who had once marched with Eleanor during redlining protests in the 72nds. The congregation was older, dozens of silver-haired men and women who wore dignity like a second skin. Reverend Boone met her at the entrance, cane in hand, eyes sharp. You look just like her, the old woman said, not smiling. Maya bowed her head. I came to ask forgiveness. You won't get it here, Reverend Boone replied. Maya blinked. Because there's nothing to forgive you for, the Reverend continued. You came back. That matters more. The service that morning wasn't about money. It was about memory. About a little girl named Maya, who once sat in the front pew, swinging her legs, not knowing her future would circle back to this very spot. After the sermon, the congregation gathered around her. Some offered old stories, some offered tears, some just held her hand. And one woman, no taller than Maya's shoulder, whispered, Don't stop, not now. We're finally being heard. The following Monday, the full-page apology ran in the nation's top newspapers. A bold headline read, To those we failed, we see you now. It was signed not just by Maya Williams but by the full current board of Bristol and Easton. By midday, calls flooded in. Some were skeptical, others were grateful, many were both. But no one could say the silence was still intact, because Maya had cracked it wide open. That evening, she sat in the East Flatbush branch, still under construction but taking shape. The vault had been gutted, and in its place stood a community meeting room. On the far wall, a mural was being painted by a local artist, Eleanor Williams, her arms wide open, standing among small businesses and brownstones. Gina stepped in. Thought you'd like to see this. She handed Maya a printout. It was a letter from a teenager named Jamal Owens, whose grandmother had received a restorative grant to finally open her laundromat after 30 years of waiting. The letter read, Asterisk, thank you for giving my grandma her dream back. I'm going to open a bookstore one day. Maybe I'll use your bank. Maybe I'll own it. Asterisk. Maya smiled, folded the letter, placed it gently into her journal. Another name remembered. Another ledger corrected. The air was thick with sawdust and something older, something deeper. Maya walked through the East Flatbush branch in the early morning light. Drywall had gone up. The scent of fresh paint lingered. But what caught her eye were the hands real, hands brown, wrinkled, weathered, youthful, strong. Locals working side by side to rebuild what had once been denied them. A young woman on a ladder painted trim along the ceiling. She caught Maya watching and smiled shyly. "This is my first union job." Maya nodded. "It won't be your last." She paused by the entrance where a brass plaque was being installed. Not her name, not Eleanor's. Just one sentence, etched in deep serif letters. "This building is an apology in progress." Back at headquarters, Gina stormed into Daniel's office. "We found a mole," she said, dropping a file onto his desk. Daniel straightened. "In restoration?" "No, deeper. It security flagged irregular activity coming from a senior compliance officer, Namis Carter Bird." Daniel flipped through the file. "Been here 17 years. Clean record." "Exactly," Gina said. "Too clean. He's been quietly redirecting internal alerts about database tampering, flagging them as user error and shelving them." Daniel frowned. "So he's the reason we didn't catch the manipulated approvals earlier. Or at least, he made sure no one else would." They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Gina added, "I already briefed Maya. She wants him in the conference room. No lawyers. No spin." Daniel nodded. "It's time." The confrontation wasn't loud. Maya didn't believe in volume as a weapon. Silence, when wielded right, could cut sharper. Carter Bird sat across the table. His tie loosened but his mask still on. "I was just doing my job." "No," Maya said, voice low and calm. "You were doing Nathan Langley's job." Even after he left, Bird opened his mouth, then closed it. "We traced the data routing. We have the logs, the metadata, the email drafts." Daniel said, laying down pages. "I didn't profit," Bird muttered it. Maya leaned forward. "You prevented profit. You denied access. You built fences where there should have been bridges." He said nothing. "You didn't sign checks," Maya continued. "You signed silences, and that might be worse." Bird swallowed, throat dry. "So what now?" "You resign," Daniel said, publicly. And," Maya added, "you write a formal statement to every applicant whose record you altered or buried. You explain what you did. No excuses. Just the truth." "Or what?" Bird asked. Maya met his eyes. "Or you spend the rest of your life watching your name rot under the weight of what it cost." He folded. That night, Maya sat by the fireplace in Eleanor's home. It had rained earlier. Now steam curled from the brick chimney. Reggie sat across from her, reading the latest reports. "You ever think it's too much?" he asked without looking up. "All the time," Maya said. "And? I remember what Eleanor said after the riots in '92. I was 10. She came home with her coat torn, her face bruised from tear gas. I asked her if it was worth it." Reggie looked up. "She told me, if justice were easy, they'd be handing it out like coupons. But real justice? That's earned. And it costs." Reggie smiled. "She was one hell of a woman." "She still is," Maya said. The next day, the bank released an internal documentary, The Ledgers We Buried. It was narrated by employees from every level: tellers, branch managers, cleaning staff. They told the story not of finances, but of faces. Of the people the bank had failed. Of the changes now being made. The final clip showed Maya standing outside the original Flatbush location. She looked into the camera and said, "Some stories don't end. They just wait to be told right." Later that week, a small box arrived at Maya's office. No return label. Inside, wrapped in linen, were 3 black and white photos from 1968. Young Eleanor, standing in front of a burned-out building in Newark. A handwritten note, attached, read, "She gave us seed when we had only ash. Thought you'd want these. T. Jackson." Maya touched the edge of the photos, then closed her eyes. Every step forward wasn't a victory. It was a restoration. In the final scene of her week, Maya stood at the new branch ribbon cutting. Not with giant scissors, not with photographers shouting. Just her, a dozen neighbors, a brass band from the local high school, and the soft hush of a community watching something return. She didn't give a speech. She handed the scissors to Mrs. Charlene Briggs, the same woman who'd once been denied a loan to open a tailoring shop. Now, She was the new branch's first community liaison. Charlene cut the ribbon with both hands trembling. The crowd erupted. Maya smiled, not because it was done, but because it had begun. It started with a question on a sticky note. Gina had left it on Maya's desk early one morning. What would a museum of broken promises look like? Maya stared at it for a long time. It wasn't just poetic, it was possible. She gathered her team that same afternoon. We've documented the failures. We've rebuilt the structures. But now we need a space to remember. Not just for shame, but for truth. For continuity. For those who were erased. Reggie scratched his beard. You're talking about a real place? Yes, Maya said. A permanent exhibit. In the lobby of the flagship branch. Right where the old boardroom used to be. Daniel nodded. Turn the place where power ignored pain into a room where pain reclaims power. The project was named the Ledger Room, a living archive of denied applications, old memos, apology letters, photos of applicants and their descendants who had survived in spite of it all. The first exhibit featured a wall titled Faces of the Forgotten. Black and white portraits, none labeled, none posed. Some were blurred, some cracked with age. But every image had one thing in common: the eyes of someone who had once walked into a bank expecting to be seen and left invisible. In the center of the room sat a long table made of repurposed teller wood, sanded and stained. The same wood once used to divide clients by color, class, and zip code. Now it brought their stories together. A week before opening, Maya received a call from Ramon Delgado, the son of a Mexican immigrant who had once applied for a microloan in 1983. Ramon was now a professor of urban sociology in California. My father never blamed the system, he said. He blamed himself. Thought he didn't speak English well enough. Thought he wasn't worthy. He died thinking that. I'm sorry, Maya said quietly. But this museum? Ramon's voice cracked. It gives him a name again. On opening day, the line wrapped around the building. Some came with photographs. Others came with silence. Entire families stood together, dressed like it was Sunday morning. Because for them, it was sacred. An old man touched the wall and whispered, "There you are, Lena. They finally put your story somewhere." A teenager stared at a rejection slip from 1991 and murmured, "That's my grandma's name." And in the corner, Maya stood unnoticed, letting the people speak for her, letting the room breathe. The exhibit sparked a ripple. Other banks reached out, asking for guidance on creating their own memorials. Universities requested Maya to guest lecture. The Smithsonian inquired about a traveling version. But Maya wasn't interested in fame. She wanted faith restored. At a televised roundtable, a journalist asked her, "What's the ROI on an apology?" Maya answered, "Dignity, for both sides." Then came a letter hand-delivered, no name. Inside, just 4 words. "You made us visible." Attached was a photo of a woman standing in front of her new cafe in the Bronx. The sign above read, "Eleanor's Table." Underneath, "Built on what they tried to bury." Back at the Ledger Room, Maya walked the floor late one night, alone. She paused at a display showing old surveillance photos, black patrons standing in long lines while white clients breezed through. One image caught her breath. A little girl in braids, holding an envelope, clutching her grandmother's hand. Her and Eleanor. She reached out and touched the glass. Behind her, Reggie entered quietly. "I found something." He handed her a leather-bound book. Inside, more of Eleanor's writings. Unpublished, raw. One line stood out, underlined in red. "We cannot heal what we refuse to name. And we cannot name what we bury." Maya closed the book and whispered, "Then let this be the naming ground." Across town, a young black mother stood in line to apply for a small business grant. She clutched a folder full of documents, photos, budgets, projections. The woman at the desk smiled and said, "Take your time. We're here to listen." The mother blinked. "Really?" "Yes, your story matters." The mother exhaled, tears forming. No one's ever said that before. Behind the counter, the teller wore a pin, "Restoration Team," and above the desk, a framed quote from Maya Williams. "Justice isn't a department, it's a direction." The winter sun hung low, spilling amber light across the marble floors of the main Bristol and Easton branch. Outside, frost traced delicate lines on the windows. Inside, heaters hummed softly, and a quiet buzz of activity carried through the newly renovated space. Maya stood at the teller counter, reviewing the day's community disbursement reports when the glass doors opened. He was tall, crisp charcoal coat, pressed shirt, leather gloves, and a red tie. Daniel saw him first. His expression changed, almost imperceptibly. "That's him," he whispered. Maya turned. Victor Evans, disgraced, publicly humiliated, legally untouchable for now. But he wasn't here for revenge. He was here for something else. "Miss Williams," he said, as if they were old colleagues. Maya offered no handshake. "Mr. Evans." The staff nearby went quiet. Reggie stepped forward from the back office, but Maya signaled him to wait. "I'd like a moment," she told them. "Alone." Daniel gave her a look. She nodded again. Calm. Clear. Victor glanced around the transformed lobby. "You've done a lot with the place," he said. "It almost feels sacred." "No." "It is," Maya replied. They walked slowly toward the ledger room. He looked at the murals, the names engraved in the brass timeline. "I underestimated you," Victor said after a long pause. "That's not the mistake that ruined you," Maya replied. He let out a dry chuckle. "Fair." He stopped in front of the wall titled, "The Erased." His eyes scanned the lines of rejected names, restored and remembered. "You put me here?" he asked, tapping a nameplate. "No," Maya said, "but you put a lot of them here." Victor sighed. "You know, when I joined this bank, they told me success was measured by silence. Smooth operations, clean books, no headlines. And you believed that?" "For a long time, yes." He turned to her. "Then you came in with your legacy and your fire and you set the whole damn system on edge." "I didn't set it on fire," Maya said. "I uncovered the ashes." Victor looked tired. Not in body, his suit was still flawless, but in spirit. Something in him sagged. "I came here today to offer something." Maya raised an eyebrow. He reached into his coat and pulled out a USB drive. Internal memos, from before the Restoration Fund. Emails between Nathan Langley, myself, and Carter Bird. Records of every manipulated denial and reclassification. Not the ones you already found. These go deeper. Into campaign finance. Property laundering. Off-book agreements. Maya stared at the drive. "Why now?" she asked. Victor looked at the mural again. "Because even I can't sleep with this anymore. And because I saw the cafe in the Bronx. Eleanor's table." He paused, voice cracking for the first time. "My mother's name was Eleanor." Maya took the drive slowly. "This doesn't redeem you." "I know, but it helps." He nodded, eyes glossy. Maya said nothing more, just turned and walked back toward the lobby. As Victor exited through the glass doors, the red tie vanished into the cold. Later that night, Maya gathered her core team. Gina scanned the contents of the drive and whistled low. "It's all here. God, it's worse than we thought." Daniel read through an email chain marked Q4 strategy, his jaw clenched. They were selling access to neighborhood buyouts before the loans were even denied. Reggie leaned on the table. "This isn't just corporate greed. This is economic warfare." Maya looked up. "Then we treat it like a battlefield." "No." By morning, the Restoration Tribunal was formed. A task force of attorneys, activists, economists, and victims, not government-run, not bank-owned, independent, transparent, empowered to investigate, report, and recommend formal restitution including criminal referrals. The media dubbed it the Truth Treasury. And Maya? She became its first chair. In the weeks that followed, depositions began. Whistleblowers stepped forward. Former employees shared files they'd hidden in fear. Each story was another stitch in the fabric of accountability. Victor never made another public appearance, but the documents he provided became part of a growing archive titled The Cost of Complicity. Every name on every line had a voice again. One afternoon, Maya received a letter in crayon. The handwriting was childlike, uneven. Asterisk, "Dear Miss Maya, my dad says you fixed the bank. He said he cried when you gave Grandma her loan. I'm going to fix things when I grow up, too. Love, Talia, age 7. Inside was a drawing. Stick figures holding hands in front of a building labeled Bank for Everyone. Maya smiled and pinned it next to her desk, because sometimes Justice came in small colors too. The morning started like any other. Melanie was reviewing restoration fund analytics. Daniel was on a video call with a regional compliance team. Gina had her head buried in grant application cross-checks. Reggie was downstairs checking on the mural preservation efforts. And Maya was in the ledger room alone, rereading an old memo from 1975 about loan denials based on unstable domestic demographics. She was circling a phrase in red pen when the fire alarm went off. Then the lights flickered. Then the smoke came. Thick, acrid, electrical. She didn't hesitate. She bolted for the main corridor, coughing, eyes stinging. By the time she reached the lobby, staff were already evacuating. Smoke poured down the hallway from the back of the building. "Server room," Gina shouted, covering her mouth with a sleeve. It started in the archive servers. Maya froze. The data. She turned back toward the restricted data center, but Reggie grabbed her arm. "No, you're not going in there. That archive holds the originals," she said, voice hoarse. "Victor's drive, the tribunal records, the raw files before we back them up." Melanie ran up, breathless. "The cloud mirror is offline. Whoever did this knew our redundancies." Maya's mind raced. So they're not just burning evidence, they're erasing history. Daniel joined them, face pale. The fire suppression system in that wing was disabled. This wasn't an accident. Maya turned to Reggie. "Is there a second backup?" Reggie hesitated. "Only one. Physical tapes. Off-site. Eleanor's lockbox." Maya nodded. "Then we go get them. Now." Eleanor's lockbox was kept in a private vault under her name at an old partner firm in Queens. Maya hadn't opened it in years. It wasn't digital. It wasn't modern. And thank God for that. Inside were 5 sealed containers labeled Blackline Evidence, AE, FJ, KO, PT, Z. Reggie exhaled slowly. She didn't trust the system even when she built it. She knew, Maya said. She always knew. Each box was filled with tape reels, photocopied memos, annotated loan applications, and transcribed meetings. Names, signatures, details. It was all still here. Back at the main branch, firefighters contained the blaze, but the damage was precise, surgical. The data servers and tribunal core units were melted beyond recovery. The official report? Suspicious origin. Electrical tampering. No casualties. Unofficially, it was sabotage. Deliberate. The media pounced. "Who is afraid of the truth?" screamed one headline. Another read, "The war for memory heats up." Literally. Public sympathy surged. Thousands of people showed up to the branch with flowers, handwritten signs, and candles. Messages scrawled in chalk lined the sidewalk. "We remember. Truth can't burn. This building belongs to us." Maya stood outside, wrapped in a borrowed coat, looking at the scorched windows. "They tried to bury us again," she said aloud. Gina stepped beside her. "They forgot we're seeds." That night, the tribunal held an emergency press conference. Maya took the mic. They tried to silence names with flame, but the stories survived. She held up one of the tapes from the lockbox. "This isn't over. This is a beginning again." In the weeks that followed, Maya and her team worked around the clock. The tapes were digitized, files restored, backup servers established in 5 states, the cloud network re-engineered with blockchain-level redundancy, and the ledger room? It was rebuilt, not in secrecy this time but in full public view. Walls of glass, exposed steel beams, every nail hammered with volunteers who had once been denied by the same institution. It became more than a room. It became a testament. One afternoon, a young archivist named Kelsey handed Maya a folder. "This was mislabeled in the lockbox," she said. Inside was a single folded page. Maya opened it. Eleanor's handwriting. "If they try to erase you, make the echo louder." Maya smiled. "It's going to echo for generations." She turned to Kelsey. "Put this in the new ledger room, right at the front." Later that week, a quiet trial began in federal court. Among the witnesses, Maya, Daniel, Melanie, Gina, and even Victor Evans testifying under oath with a voice quieter than the one he used to command boardrooms. The charges? Conspiracy to commit financial discrimination, destruction of evidence, fraud, A landmark case. The courtroom was filled every day, and outside, hundreds watched the proceedings live-streamed in public libraries, community centers, and churches. Justice wasn't fast, but it was walking, unafraid. It rained on the morning the verdict came down. Not a storm, just a quiet drizzle, as if the sky itself was exhaling. The kind of weather where truths settle into the soil. Maya sat on the wooden bench outside the federal courthouse, her coat damp at the shoulders. A small group had gathered across the street, elderly women in church hats, young men in hoodies, working mothers with strollers, even a teenage girl holding a cardboard sign that simply read, "My grandmother was one of them." Inside, the courtroom was silent as the jury filed in. The clerk read the charges. Conspiracy, destruction of protected records, discrimination under federal lending statutes, fraud. The room seemed to hold its breath. Guilty, on all counts. The moment was surreal. Victor Evans lowered his head. No protests, no defiance, just resignation. Carter Bird stared at the ceiling, as if he might find mercy in the panels above. The courtroom did not erupt. There were no cheers, just silence. Deep, sacred. Justice, when it arrives this slowly, does not crash like thunder. It settles. Outside, someone wept. Maya turned to see Melanie hugging a woman in her 70s, both crying, both laughing at the same time. Daniel was on his phone, already coordinating post-verdict protocols with the tribunal's legal wing. Reggie stood a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets, watching it all unfold with the quiet pride of a man who had helped lay each brick of this day. Gina approached Maya. "They'll appeal." "I know, but it won't matter," Gina said. "This moment it's already stamped. We changed something, and they felt it." Maya looked at the courthouse. "Let's make sure they never forget it." No. That evening, Maya returned to Eleanor's house one last time. It had been sold to the city as part of the Restoration Initiative, a future heritage site. But tonight, it was still hers, still home. She wandered through the study, fingers grazing the shelves of old books, the fading photos on the mantel. One in particular stopped her. A photo of young Eleanor standing on the steps of the bank in 1963, surrounded by protesters holding signs. "Where's our credit? Redlining equals life stealing." Maya traced the image with her fingertip. Then she walked to the fireplace and lit the last envelope her grandmother had left her marked "Burn when it's done." Inside was a note. "Justice doesn't rest in courts. It lives in kitchens. It rides buses. It waits in line. That's where it must be protected. That's where it must grow." The paper curled and turned to ash. Maya closed her eyes. It was done. The next week, the East Flatbush branch reopened fully, no longer just a bank. It housed a community legal office, a financial literacy center, and a childcare co-op named Promise Room. Outside, a mural wrapped the brick facade, being faces of real people whose names had been recovered from the ledger room. And above the door, carved into the arch, "What was denied will now define." Oh, the building didn't feel like a monument. It felt like a heartbeat. National networks picked up the story again. But this time, the headlines were different. Not just a trial, a turning point. Restoration banking, a new era. The heiress who chose justice over legacy. When asked for comment, Maya offered only one sentence. "There's nothing radical about equity. It's just overdue." Weeks later, she gave one last public address. She stood under soft lighting in the ledger room, a crowd seated in folding chairs, with cameras pointed gently, not intrusively. "There's no finish line in justice," she said. "There are only checkpoints." She looked around the room. "At some point, you realize your job isn't to fix what broke. It's to build what never existed in the first place. A system that sees. A ledger that listens. A future that doesn't need memorials because it got it right the first time." A long pause. Then she smiled. "And if it takes 1,000 more chapters to get there, we'll write them." Later that night, she walked the long hallway alone. Past the photos, past the documents, past the faces. She stopped at the glass wall overlooking the city. Outside, streetlights blinked through the mist. Cars passed. Laughter echoed from a late-night bodega. And in the distance, she saw the glow of a small business called Eleanor's Table. Still open, still warm. Maya exhaled. Not an ending, just the edge of a new page. 6 months passed. Spring bloomed gently across Brooklyn. the kind of slow, hopeful arrival that made people linger longer on porches, talk to strangers in line, and let their coffee go cold in favor of conversation. Maya stood inside the main lobby of the East Flatbush branch, now buzzing with life. No more velvet ropes, no security glass between teller and client. The walls were lined with art from local students, free Wi-Fi, bookshelves with financial literacy guides, cookbooks, children's stories, and in the center of the room, a bronze sculpture, 2 hands holding a single coin. No face, no name, just the act of offering. Maya had stepped down as chair of the Restoration Tribunal 2 months earlier. She refused any accolades, no awards, no interviews. Her statement at the time was short. The work belongs to everyone now. Let it breathe. She still worked, quietly, advising community banks across the country, mentoring young Black women in finance, helping small churches navigate credit union partnerships. She visited 1 branch opening a week, sometimes 2. But this morning, this moment was different. She had received a letter, handwritten, in black ink, with the return address of a prison facility in upstate New York. It was from Victor Evans. Asterisk, I have nothing left to defend, but I wanted to say that I saw the garden bloom where we once planted stones. You changed the ground beneath us. Thank you for letting me witness the light. Asterisk. Maya folded the letter gently, placing it in a drawer beneath her desk. Some ghosts deserve to rest, even the ones who helped bury truth before they helped dig it up. Across the room, Charlene Briggs, now community liaison, was giving a workshop to a group of new applicants. One of them, a single father named Thomas, stood nervously with his folder. I didn't think I could even get in the door, he said. Charlene smiled. You own the door now. Maya watched from a distance, heart steady. She didn't need to lead anymore. She needed only to keep the flame alive. Outside, a new plaque had been unveiled just that morning. Children from a local school had voted on the wording. It read, "This place was built on names they tried to forget, but we remember, and we build, together." Later that afternoon, Maya walked the quiet back hall of the ledger room. A new installation had been added, a sound booth where visitors could record their family's banking stories, successes, or struggles. Each voice was stored, archived, and reviewed by the tribunal to find overlooked injustices. But more than that, it gave people something they'd never been offered in the financial system before. A chance to speak. She stepped into the booth, sat down, pressed record, and spoke quietly. My name is Maya Williams. I was born into legacy, but it was never meant for me to inherit. I had to fight for the right to earn it. I saw my grandmother's name buried. I saw my people's dreams dismissed. I watched as balance sheets told lies that no one bothered to correct. And then, we corrected them. She paused, then continued. If you're hearing this, maybe you lost something too. A loan, a home, a future someone told you wasn't yours. I hope this room reminds you. It was yours. It still can be. She stopped the recording and exited. That night, Maya returned to her modest brownstone. No staff, no guards, no walls of glass. Just wind chimes, the smell of rain, and the soft creak of a wooden porch. She made tea, pulled out the notebook Eleanor once carried, scribbled in the final page. This story is still being written, but it's no longer written by the few. It belongs to the many. She closed the journal and smiled, because finally, the bank belonged to everyone. This is not just a tale about a bank, or even about injustice. It's about what happens when one woman chooses not to accept silence as her inheritance. Maya Williams taught us that justice doesn't arrive with fanfare. It begins in quiet defiance, in the decision to stay standing when the world tells you to leave. It grows each time someone listens, each time truth is spoken where lies once lived. The story reminds us that legacy isn't about what we keep, it's about what we repair. And healing doesn't happen through punishment alone, it happens when we name the harm, restore the memory, and build structures where dignity can live. Most of all, it shows that real power doesn't come from titles or wealth. It comes from refusing to let the forgotten stay forgotten. Because in the end, the most radical act of justice is to remember and to make that memory matter.